Hello and welcome to the Steelers Depot live stream here on Monday, February 21st. As always, I am Alex Kozora from SteelersDepot.com here to answer your Steelers questions for the next hour until 8 p.m. Eastern Time. No Dave Bryan today, just me. You guys are stuck with my voice the entire time. Dave's on vacation. He will be back or should be back for the next live stream we do in 2 weeks. So I'll get to as many questions as possible in today's chat. If you have a question, be sure to send it in the chat, and you can send us a super chat as well if you want to move to the front of the line and have your question be guaranteed to be asked and answered by me. Big day for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Kevin Colbert speaking with the media. Tons of articles and pieces of information that Colbert gave all of us. Just let me know if you guys can hear me. If there's any audio issues, I imagine that there aren't, but if there are any problems with the stream or the sound, please let me know. All right, so I'll kind of just scroll through some of these headlines and things that Colbert said, and I'm sure some of your questions will reflect that as well. We'll start things here with Verdon Barzy. Says, hey guys, missed the last show. Glad to be back. Glad you are here, Verdon. Watson solves all of our quarterback issues. Do we have a better chance with Flores since he wanted to go to Miami? I suppose the odds can't be hurt by Brian Flores being hired by the Pittsburgh Steelers, which, by the way, just on its own was a tremendous hire. I'm really excited to see that one for Tomlin and for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But I don't think it really is going to move the needle too much because I don't expect Brian Flores to be a Pittsburgh Steeler for too terribly long a year, maybe two at most, just given the fact that clearly this is a guy with the talent and the pedigree and the resume to be a defensive coordinator or head coach somewhere. So I don't expect him to be a linebackers coach assistant in Pittsburgh for too terribly long. But it seemed like Pittsburgh probably the only place that was going to offer him a job, and so he took it to stay as close to football as possible. So obviously Watson needs to resolve all the legal things he's dealing with right now, the civil suits and whatever else he has going on before there's really any sort of chance for any team to trade for him, Pittsburgh or otherwise. But I do not expect Deshaun Watson to become a Pittsburgh Steeler. Next question here comes from Noah Baker. Says, what do you think the chances are that Chooks is re-signed, and what do you think the cost would be to do so? Love the mock draft today. Keep up the great work. Thank you so much, Noah. If you haven't seen it already, my very first Pittsburgh Steelers mock draft came out on Steelers Depot Monday morning. It is sticky to the top of the page, and you guys can go through it, and I'll kind of thumb through it as well while I answer Noah's question. With the core four, there's certainly a chance. Yeah, that's a tough one for me to figure out. I don't know exactly where to place the odds. I would put it at currently less than 50%, but he certainly could be re signed. My overall stance and philosophy is if you really want to get some big, radical, sweeping changes to this O line, you better make some, big changes to this offensive line and not try to run back the group, even knowing there was going to be or expected to be growth and development with some young guys like Kendrick Green and Dan Moore, even Kevin Dotson. But overall, with the core four, his season was okay. I kind of the way I've summed up a core four is he's the best offensive lineman on a bad offensive line and the worst offensive lineman on a good offensive line, and so he was more of that best of a bad situation last year. But I think overall, while his sack numbers were low, I only had him charged for 2 sacks the entire season, which is a really good number for a tackle. It didn't reflect how often he got beat to the inside as a run blocker on that right side. He's a stalemate guy, doesn't get a great push overall. And so if you want that identity of more physical, more nasty, Corver was a bit more finesse, a bit more technical, and I don't think he's a super high level guy in pass pro. In terms of cost, again, it is hard to figure out. Offensive linemen get paid in free agency. If you have a relatively young, he's what, 25, 26, 27 years old, tackle on the market, those guys do get paid because most teams don't let those guys get away. So there's an O line tax and in general free agency tax to consider there. So my guess is that he'll be sitting in that probably kind of what Matt Filer got, $7 million range. It could be a little bit more with the cap bouncing back a bit compared to last year's crunch. So it is hard to peg that number. And O linemen tend to get more than what people think. Zach Banner, example, getting paid more than what the Steelers, what we thought the Steelers would pay him, or anyone would pay him last year. Let's see. Next question here comes from, and yeah, Ross Swisher. No Dave today. He's on vacation, so just me flying solo. Dave will be back for our next live stream 2 weeks from now. Daniel, why get Watson as he is likely to get suspended for an extended time? Would you trade for Derek Carr? I would say one first round pick and one third round pick, but no more. Yeah, Watson, like I said to Verdon, before anything, the legal stuff needs to be cleared. And obviously, you want to see if the NFL takes any action or not before you make a trade for him. So, really, those questions should be answered and known by the time Watson ends up with a new team once Houston moves him. So that's the first part of the question. For Carr, I don't have an exact list of what I would give up. I'd certainly be open to trading for Derek Carr. I think he's a higher level quarterback that's still pretty young, and while you will have to pay him, you can lock him up for a long time. When he's been a good quarterback overall for the Raiders. So what would I give up? I'd probably be willing to give up more than what you're saying, Daniel, a first and a third. I don't know exactly where I come in on the exact draft capital that I would be willing to give up. But if you have a chance to get that franchise quarterback and be aggressive about it, I would be okay with that. Next one comes from Wes Hickok. Why draft a quarterback when they won't help us in 2022? Follow up. What kind of meds do you got to be on to think Mason Rudolph makes us more than a 4 or 5 win team in 2022? Um, to the first part of that, I think the focus needs to be less on winning immediately and building that long term game plan, Wes. If you find a quarterback who, yes, may not help you substantially this upcoming year, but helps you for the next 7, 8 years, 10, 15 years, whatever long it is for a franchise guy, but potentially, then that's kind of the trade off you're willing to accept, at least that I'm willing to accept. 1 year doesn't help you a ton for the potential and the hope of helping you long term. Just in the way that the drafting Ben in '04 at the time didn't seem like it was helping that team right then and there. But this team is not. While they're going to profess they're in that Super Bowl win now mode, they're not obviously in the same category in that post-Ben era and a very competitive AFC overall of Mahomes and Burrow and Herbert and Allen and all those names. And so you sacrifice the 1 year for the hopefully very beautiful tomorrow is the idea. And with Rudolph, yeah, I get that. I think they'd be better than a 4 or 5 win team under Rudolph. I mean, they went 8-8 with him and Duck in 19. Granted, with a very elite defense that year, but I'm confident and optimistic this defense will bounce back in 2022. Appreciate the question, though. Got a super chat here, $10 super chat from Bryan. Thank you so much. Says, hi, Alex. Hope you're well. Thoughts on Zach Banner moving forward and your 2022 Steelers starting quarterback hot take prediction? With Banner, I think it's really tough to justify that, what is it, $5 million base salary he's going to have, or the money, like, I think it's $5 million you save if you cut him prior to roster displacement. And unless you think he's going to be your slam dunk starting right tackle in 2022, then I don't know how you keep him at that number. Now, maybe you do a pay cut, and certainly you could just release him entirely. But as a backup, he's just a right tackle. He does not have that versatility that most backup offensive linemen in Pittsburgh do. And so, unless he's going to be your starter, and obviously, if that was the case, you don't really still know much about him. He has not gotten to play because of injuries and, recovering from the ACL tear last year and just never got a role. And Joe Hay played over him, the back half of the year when, Banner got activated and healthy. So, I think my thought is that you probably either ask him to take a massive pay cut to about, if not the veteran minimum, or you cut ties entirely and save yourself money that you can apply to free agency. In terms of your second question, for the 2022 quarterback, I really wish I had an answer for you. I don't. I mean, I know Kevin Colbert's today, his comments today about, Mason be the starter right now. He's the only quarterback under contract right now. So, I mean, Rudolph or Haskins will get tendered. So, he will be still part of this roster. My guess is that it will not be either of those two guys. I do think they like Rudolph more than most of us like Mason Rudolph, but when they talk about the desire for mobility and those kinds of aspects, obviously that's not Mason Rudolph, sans his 26-yard run that he had against the Lions. And so I just think it'll be someone else ultimately. Because if they go sign a veteran guy, there'll be a competition. No one would be handed the job, but that is kind of an indication they want something else. They're looking for more if they go sign a veteran of some significant, value. Let's see. Next question comes from Mike Adesso. Good to hear from you, Mike. I like the mock today, Alex. Would be a nice haul. Thank you. Here's a dumb question. If the Steelers draft Kenyon Green, how would they put his name on the jersey? With two Ken Greens would be weird. Yeah, you just have to do probably to the Y or to the D, Kend for Kendrick or Keny for Kenyon. I don't know how else they would do that. I think that happened with actually Cade Mays, the offensive lineman from Tennessee. His brother, I think his name is Cole, plays for the Volunteers as well. And so I think maybe Mays jersey even fully just said Cade. Obviously, could have just been CA. I can't quite remember, but that has happened before. So there you go. Interesting question though. But let's get the guy in the building first with Kenyon Green and kind of proceed from there. Let's see, someone had a question there that I wanted to get to briefly. Yeah, the Isaiah in my mock, Ross Swisher is his nephew, but there are some conflicting information about whether or not he's draft eligible this year. So it's still a little hard to find out in this post COVID world. $20 super chat here from Double HH, very kind for you to do. Says this is just another contribution to the future Trevor Kozora fund. That is all. Well, I appreciate that mostly Double HH, but yeah. Not gonna not gonna get to live that one down anytime soon. I don't think so. Be sure to like the chat if you guys could. That's gonna help out me quite a bit and get more people into the chat as well. Only shows 9 people. Hopefully, there's more than 9 people in here. But I know it's the off season and these are now bi-weekly, and so fewer people seem to enter the chat. Let's see. Next question comes from as I scroll up and find the next question from John Pennington. Good to hear from you, John. Hey guys, what would it take for the Steelers to drop out of the first round, and what picks could they receive to benefit them by doing so? There it is, 63 people in the chat. That looks a little bit better. So glad to see that. Thank you guys for being here. And again, we're here, or I'm here until the top of the hour. To John's question, what would it take to drop out of the first round entirely? A lot. I mean, Kevin Colbert's never done it before. Only traded one first round pick, and that was obviously to get Minka. So it would obviously the quarterbacks have to be gone, offensive lineman off the board, and just some sort of unbelievable offer for somebody. I don't know who that would be for Pittsburgh to move down at least 13 spots. So I really cannot see that happening. And in Kevin Colbert's final draft, I see him making a first round pick, John. K. Jackson, Pittsburgh. Hey guys, do you believe there will be a philosophical difference with how Minka Fitzpatrick was used in Miami with how he was used with the Steelers? Obvious question since the Flores hiring. No, I'm not worried about that. I think Pittsburgh has proven the best way to use Minka Fitzpatrick. I would assume Brian Flores now sees and agrees what the best way to use Minka Fitzpatrick is. Listen, Pittsburgh tried to move Fitzpatrick a bit the first 2 weeks of 2021, and Fitzpatrick did struggle, and then they kind of scrapped that idea and let Fitzpatrick play his usual free safety, post safety, robber lurk spots where he's most comfortable and where he plays the best. And so Pittsburgh has themselves even found out moving him around into that slot kind of role the way Miami did. It's not the best thing for him or for the team. So I'm really not concerned there one bit. Mark Leslie, which member of the Steelers roster is most likely to stop a 40-man brawl in a Golden Corral? That's a good question. I'll say Cam Hayward. Hayward's the kind of guy with the voice and the presence and the strength that I think would be the guy there. It's not Chris Boswell. I'll tell you that much, Mark. It's not me either. Leedy 1, how bad do you think we will be in 2022? Leedy, you were saying it's a one-win team like our last time here, so I think you're all in on the negativity for this year. Let's see how the off season goes and all that, and the draft and whatnot before we talk about records here. for this team because it's going to change, quite a bit from February 21st to May 21st. Let's see. Go back to the chats here. We have one from actually a nice comment here from Dave Shipley. My man, love your breakdown. Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Dave. Appreciate you being here. Good to have a Dave here in the chat with Dave Bryan. All over the globe right now. I know he's just out west, driving around West Coast. Let's see. Next question comes from Dave Shipley. Speaking of the devil, you have the number one offensive line or defensive lineman, quarterback only if Willis falls. I'm not entirely sure what you're asking. Are you saying would I choose either the best offensive lineman, the best defensive lineman, or Malik Willis? I have to watch more Willis. I've been attacking quarterbacks starting earlier this weekend. I watched a full vetting of Sam Howell from North Carolina. I think Willis will be next for me on my list. So I'm probably not entirely comfortable with an answer on that quite yet. Given the strength of the tackles, though, would be tough to pass up unless you love one of these quarterbacks. Obviously, quarterbacks more valuable than tackles. Um, but given those options, you would look at a tackle very strongly. And then K Jackson asking about best route, drafting a quarterback or signing a vet. Why not both? Do the meme of why not both? You could do a bridge quarterback and draft somebody. Those are your four quarterbacks, and one of those you'll only carry three on your regular season roster. But Haskins probably becomes odd man out at that point. So in terms of best option, like I said, the options are pretty wide open. I keep everything on the table right now, but obviously this team will need to find a long-term fixture of this team, of this offense, of this franchise, and that's really only going to happen through the draft unless you make a trade for one of those, big name guys, and Aaron Rodgers, Derek Carr, should they become available. And right now, we don't get the strong sense those guys will become available, but we'll have to wait and see. Am I going to the combine, Mike? No, I will not. But we will have Jonathan Heitritter of Steelers Depot at the combine. So we will have representative there. And I just saw the NFL announce they're lifting the bubble for the combine. There was a threat of a boycott from 155 prospects who would not really do much of anything at Indy aside from medical evaluations. And so that has been lifted because of the threat of the boycott. So, hopefully the combine should be pretty active this year, and good to see it back after not taking place in 2021. Next question comes from Paul Brown. Hey, Alex, would it be ridiculous to think the Steelers promote Coach T to GM and have him pull double duty like Bill Belichick did? Unlikely to happen, but would this be an option you think Tomlin would do? No, I think Tomlin is so hands-on, day to day as a coach, that double duty would be tough, and I don't like that the dynamic in general of one guy being both. I think there is some give and take, some conversation, and it's not one guy completely running the show. Belichick is forever the exception to these things. So it is good to have someone that can be that soundboard, someone who scouts during the fall and the winter when the coach is coaching and the GM can be on scouting trips and stuff like that. There's value there that helps get that coach a head start once he kind of integrates himself in the draft season. So obviously not going to happen this year. With a GM will be hired, but not something I think Tomlin has a great desire to do. Ross Swisher, hey, howdy, Alex and Dave. Who would you rather they sign, Ryan Jensen or Teron Armstead? Both would be good signings. Different positions: tackle for Armstead, center for Jensen. I really want to get that strong guy in the middle, and so my first inclination is Jensen. Armstead has dealt with injury issues. I think Jensen, to be fair, has had some issues as well. I think he's played through a lot of stuff. But I want that veteran center type. And then I think you can find some good tackles earlier in this draft. Lumberzack 94. Hey Alex, how did you take the little news we finally got about Tuitt? We haven't heard anything since training camp, so it sounded positive, though I could be hearing what I want to hear. Yeah, there was a little bit of positivity, maybe a bit of an optimistic tone that Colbert struck. I've not gotten to see the full comments from Colbert, so I don't know exactly, word for word what he said, and I obviously did not get to hear them to hear what the tone of the conversation regarding Tuitt was like. But the door's still open. It was good to hear something. Good to hear that they're talking with him right now. That's all positive. So maybe that opens the door a bit for his, chance to return to Pittsburgh in 2022. But nothing's guaranteed. Nothing is definitive. And I'll wait until we have that answer to really be able to react to it. Obviously, I would love to see Stefan Tuitt in Pittsburgh in 2022, but I'll respect his decision no matter what that decision is. Did I get a super chat? I did from Dave Shipley. Thank you so much, my man. $10 super chat says, who replaces Edmonds if not re-signed? And if Tuitt doesn't return, is D-line a major priority? A lot of pieces, and should be an exciting offseason, especially with the cap space available. If Edmonds is gone, it's no one on the roster. I don't know who would replace him on the roster. Norwood's not a strong safety. Killebrew's not going to replace him. He's a you know, specialty package, big defense, third safety kind of guy, and a core special teamer, but not someone who's going to replace Edmonds as your every down strong safety playing 1,000 snaps a year. So it's probably a veteran free agent, but I don't know the name of who that would be. It would not be an in-house candidate. To Tuitt, if Tuitt does not return, obviously you would explore that, and certainly you could and arguably should add to the group. But let's assume that Tuitt's not back. And let's assume you re-sign Montravius Adams. Your defensive line room will look like Hayward, Alualu, who we know is coming back, Chris Wormley, who played well, had 7 sacks last season, Montravius Adams, and Isaiah Loudermilk, plus maybe something for Carlos Davis and someone like that, Henry Mondo on the roster as well. So those are 5 guys right there, and you're going to carry 6 on your 53-man roster. They always carry 6. So I don't think it would be quite as big of a need as people think. I think you would look for a sub-package pass rusher because Loudermilk's pass rush ability is pretty limited at this point in time. But I think in terms of your base defense of Alualu and Hayward and Wormley and Loudermilk rotating in at the end spots is a solid group right there. I think you would look for a sub package pass rusher. Adams has some juice and some burst there to kind of rush, not just be a pure, one tech, zero tech shade nose tackle in a base 3-4. But that's what you would look for. But I would not consider it quite as high of a priority. I think O line still be higher, quarterback still be higher. I think off ball linebacker arguably would be higher, assuming that they do something with Joe Schobert and Devin Bush, assuming the option is not picked up, which I very much doubt it will be, entering the last year of his rookie contract. And so all of those things to me would still be higher than the defensive line. Let's see, scroll back up here to the chat. I'm not used to talking this much when it's just by myself. I gotta power through, but I'll be okay. Thinking about doing a face cam. If I figure this stuff out, that'll kind of I think help some of these as well. Let's see. Next question. Rob James, do you think Flores pairing up with Tomlin makes Pittsburgh an ideal landing spot for big name free agents? It depends on the guy, and money talks. End of the day, who's going to get paid the most money and where that's going to be is certainly going to be an influence on where these guys go. But yeah, I think you'd have a coaching staff of guys that you would really want to play for, and be an inviting environment of Terrell Austin and Brian Flores and Mike Tomlin and just that group in general. So I think it would be an attractive place to come to, but it's always a case by case kind of thing. Rob. Yes, Carr still under contract, but there's been some trade rumors. My guess is the Raiders keep him. I don't know if you come in and trade a quarterback like Carr, um, but we'll see. Todd says, with Juju and James Washington pretty much gone, how high is wide receiver on your list of needs? It's up there. And I know my mock draft today I only had a 6th-round pick in Danny Gray from SMU, but we'll see how free agency and things like that change, and certainly receiver could still go much, much higher. I don't think it's a first-round play, but second round and on, I think it is in play. I'd like to find that burner, as Steve and I have talked about, that speed guy that can really be a true vertical threat in this offense. I think this team desperately needs that. So receiver, yeah. I don't know exactly how to rank it, but it would be up there, Todd. Let's see. Nathan says Norwood might actually be the plan to pair with Minka. I want Norwood on the field more. I think he's deserved that based off his really solid and successful rookie season. but he's not a strong safety. He's not a box type. He did show more physicality and was a decent tackler overall, was certainly with willingness and want to, but the body type overall doesn't fit well. And I think Norwood is going to be best in the slot in terms of an expanded role. Now, you could argue there's going to be a physicality component that's needed for the slot, um, but I just don't see it at strong safety. He's a free safety. He's a slot guy. And he's a sub package dime kind of dude. I don't see that in that strong safety mold. Even slot has its downsides, but his coverage ability overall has been so strong in those nickel, slightly more passing situations as opposed to your base defense that you want to play Norwood in the slot. Again, here till 8 o'clock, so be sure to get your questions in, and thank you guys that have sent in the super chats so far. I will do a video for my mock draft in video form in the next day or two, but you can also read it on Steelers Depot right now. Let's see. Dave's asking if the Steelers are okay at tight end. Yeah, I think they're good. He says they need a solid number two blocking tight end like McDonald. Gentry has really become that guy. He's like a big offensive tackle that can catch and run routes better than a six offensive lineman tackle eligible could. And so his growth and development was really important and surprising and needed this year. So, maybe there are some slight depth concerns beyond Pat Fryermuth and Zach Gentry. Kevin Rader, Jay Sternberg are the other tight ends on the roster right now. But I think Gentry is your blocking guy, Dave. Mark saying maybe it's just me, but if you're just gonna have a quarterback for a season, aren't we as well save the money and just ride with Mason for a season and fix the other holes and get a quarterback next year? Yeah, but if you're looking for a long term guy and you think you can get that guy now, then you're not gonna wait on that because you don't know if you'll have a chance to get one in future years. In terms of if you're asking that from a bridge quarterback, why go sign a bridge guy when you can just ride with Mason? I get that point, and that's a valid point, but I think Pittsburgh would want more mobility than Mason Rudolph, and there's going to be an asset there for a quarterback who's not going to be great, who can make plays with his legs and not always with his arm. That's going to be an asset. Also, good to have competition and not hand anybody the job. And so you have two guys battling it out there to bring out the best in both of them, allow Pittsburgh to really make a choice as opposed to just feeling like they're obligated to hand the job to just one guy, in this case, Mason Rudolph, and also to protect yourself against injury. If someone gets hurt, then you have another veteran guy, be it Rudolph or the veteran bridge guy that you would sign to come in if the other guy, the starter, gets hurt. So I think there are valid reasons to still explore that bridge guy, and it doesn't really hurt your team too much because it's a 1 year thing. You're not assuming you're not trading for a guy or spending big money on a guy. It's a 1 year rental bridge type of situation, so it's not really setting back your team in any sort of meaningful way. Let's see. Scrolling on through. Rob James, draft question with Corral getting injured in the bowl game and a smaller frame. Is it possible he falls? If he does, would you trade down for him and pick up an extra third? A lot of hypotheticals there. I need to watch Matt Corral as well. That whole quarterback class is pretty jumbled up right now. Willis seems to be separating himself a bit at the top, same with Kenny Pickett. Then behind him, you'll have Desmond Ritter and Carson Strong and Sam Howell and guys like that. So there's a lot of layers to that question I probably can't best answer right now, Rob. World's worst FIFA player? How do you feel about Chase Claypool and his future with the Steelers? Do you think he can shine with a different scheme? Love the guy, but it seems like the ball hits his hands and the floor too much. Yeah, it was a tough year for Claypool. I think maturity standpoint, got to be more mature. I think he did display some of that later in the season, so that was positive. Pittsburgh drafted him to be the Z clear out receiver, the vertical threat in this offense, and he's been unable to consistently prove he can be that guy. Does not run to his time speed of that 4.42. Doesn't stack enough, as Dave likes to talk about, and so I don't know what changes schematically would really you know impact that. Now, a quarterback with a better arm overall, on paper, I think would certainly help Chase Claypool and help the vertical attack of this offense, but it doesn't fix Claypool's inability to stack and separate and really play to that time, speed, and overall athleticism. So there was a general concern about where he fits best. Is he a Z? Supposed to be, hasn't thrived there the way that he needs to. Is he a slot? He can be a vertical guy, but Pittsburgh, at least with Juju, like that guy to be more of the 5-yard option route guy, the tough guy, the secure hands guy, the third down option. Um, and Claypool, not really that guy either. So there's an awkwardness of where he fits best. And the scheme is going to change some, but it's still the same OC. So it's not going to change dramatically in terms of what they would expect from a Chase Claypool. Let's see, almost 100 people here in the chat. Half hour we have left, so appreciate you guys being here. Bobby Burster, worst day one starting quarterback of Steelers or who? That's a good question. People a little bit older than me can probably answer that, but he would be up there to read. So did Kent Graham start week one? If he did, that might be. You're always getting that Kent Graham era. I don't know for sure if he was a week one starter when they signed him in free agency or not. I'm sure somebody can answer that better than I can try to research it in the chat. Tim Chase, good to hear from you, Tim. $5 super chat. Thanks for your great job tonight. Thank you, Tim. Appreciate it. I'm trying to not get winded here, talking just solo. But thank you, and be sure to check out the Terrible Podcast today. You can hear more from me and Josh Carney as we go through the Brian Flores hire, my mock draft, and other pieces of Steelers information. And also, in terms of mock drafts, I may do a live, like fan speak, some sort of mock draft. It won't be the mock draft big event that I did last year, although hopefully we will do that later this year. But I might do some live mock draft stuff because you guys seem to really enjoy that, and it's a lot of fun for me as well. Will Flores be working on a day-to-day basis with Bush and Highsmith? I'm not entirely sure what his role is going to be. He's carrying a very similar title to what Terrell Austin did. Austin was the senior defensive assistant slash secondary coach, and during practices and training camp, he was essentially the de facto secondary coach. But his team also has Jerry Olsofsky as the off-ball linebackers coach, and Carl Dunbar works very closely with the edge guys, him and Denzel Martin. So I would imagine Flores would interact with the linebackers the most, given the linebackers coach title. But I think we'll have to wait and see on how that looks come camp. And also, I think on game day he'll be in the booth as kind of the in-game management assistant, the way that Austin was for Tomlin the past 2 years or 3 years, however long it's been. I think it's been 3 years: 2019, 2020, 2021. So yeah, 3 years. Let's see. Christian Harris and Damone Clark are on the board for our second pick. Who you take? And that's from Jason Williams. I'd go Clark, but I haven't seen enough of Harris yet. But I think Clark checks all those boxes: the size, the length, power five, high character, productivity. I had Clark in my mock draft today, so I would go with Damone Clark there, Jason. Let me scroll back up here. Joey, I'm here till 8 p.m., so 27 minutes, give or take. Cookie face, should we go for it all by trading for a quarterback or should we take a few losing seasons? I don't think it's necessarily one or the other, but if you have a quarterback that becomes available in terms of a elite level guy, then I think you'd be aggressive about it. I would not be in favor of um, trading for Jimmy Garoppolo or Carson Wentz or even a Matt Ryan. I think if you're going to make the trade, you got to go for a big name, a Rodgers, a Carr, someone like that. Not a middling option that may put you in, and most likely will put you in quarterback purgatory. Saloon says, "Good evening, Alex. Good to hear from you, man. Great show as always. Mariota, Brissett, Rudolph. How would pick? Who it says how would pick as our starter next year? I'm assuming it says who would I pick as a starter next season? Cheers from Brazil. Um, None of those options are obviously great, and so any answer here is going to be probably looked down upon. I've mentioned Brissett not because I love Jacoby Brissett. I don't. But with the whole NC State connection, and especially given the hire of Frisman Jackson, him, Eddie Faulkner, Matt Canada all together at NC State while Jacoby Brissett was there. So if you want to play that dot connecting game, that's very easy to do with him. And there is a bit of an arm and mobility, and he's not going to break the bank, obviously, in terms of money. I think Mariota is a good fit from the mobility standpoint, the pedigree standpoint. There is an injury concern with him. I think you have to, if you were to sign him, you have to kind of assume he's going to miss 1 to 3 games per season. But you have a competent spot starter in Mason Rudolph there. So I think it's a risk you're willing to take. So if you made me answer, I guess I would go Mariota. Obviously, again, not great choices here, but from the mobility aspect of it all, um, I think that'll bail you out of some bad situations, kind of the way that a Josh Dobbs has been able to. But Mariota has really not played much the last 2 years, so you have to understand you don't entirely know what you have in Marcus Mariota. What position has the most depth in the draft? That's from Thomas. Receiver typically lately, Thomas receivers always kind of have been the deepest position, just as a product of the college game in general, spread systems, high flying offenses, pass heavy groups, and so that naturally lends itself to having a bunch of receivers. And those guys don't deal with press, and they get to run free, and they get to look good, and have their draft stock be built up and stuff like that. So I think most years, um, receiver tends to be the deepest, and I think this year it is a good receiver class overall. You're going to see there is maybe not one guy above the rest. I think there isn't a ton of top heaviness in this draft overall, where like a position has a clear cut number one guy that exists at a couple spots, but it doesn't exist at most spots. But overall, receiver depth I think is strong. Tight end depth this year is good. Tight end is unusually deep this year. The tackle class is good as well. So those are my answers there. Todd, not a big fan of Trubisky. Again, I'm not going to kill the team for any hypothetical bridge guy they would bring in because I would understand that's just a short term play. But I think a lot of coaches are going to think we can fix him, and most times you can't. And I don't know what has happened from his Bears time to now that changes that. He was a backup in Buffalo, played a little bit. I think you just kind of it just time that makes you forget why Chicago cut ties with him in the first place. And I did not like Trubisky coming out of North Carolina to start. I was not a big fan of him even pre-draft, and so maybe there's a bit of influence there in my assessment of him today. But I've never been a big fan of Mitchell Trubisky's game. Nathan, free agency is a better avenue to get O lineman than the draft, right? It can be both. It probably should be both, given the need for this O line to improve. For agency, you get more veteran guys, more known guys, but it's more expensive and they're older. Draft, you get younger guys, cheaper guys, but there is a bit more of a projection there because they have not played in the NFL. So it just depends. I think you look at what free agency offers, what the draft offers, and if it's let's say it's just making stuff up here, it's a really strong tackle class in the draft, and actually it is this year, I think overall. But let's say it's a really strong tackle class in the draft, and for agency at tackle, it's pretty weak, which also normally it generally is because good tackles don't hit the market too often. Then you would say, well, we're not going to overpay in free agency because there's that tax you pay, especially for the offensive line. So let's go draft somebody instead that's younger, cheaper, and locked in that 4 or 5 year contract. Vice versa, if you have a strong tackle class in free agency and a weak tackle class in the draft, then you would say let's go after free agency because in the draft we might not find that guy. So I think that's the way you look at free agency versus draft, generally speaking. Let's see. Next question. Got a super chat here from Dave Shipley. $2 says hit like. Yeah, if you guys could like the stream, would appreciate it. And Dave, thank you so much. But my man, you don't have to send any more super chats. I think you've done enough for the chat today, so I appreciate that. Also says no GM yet. Thoughts on that? My expectation, even when they announced that Colbert was going to step down after the draft, was they weren't going to officially announce a guy until after the draft. It'd be weird to do that while Colbert was still the GM, especially with an external candidate who would be like the GM, but also not part of the team yet. And Colbert's going to draft this one anyway. So my thought has always been post draft was when they were going to announce it, and that's been confirmed by the team today. And I will put that article up right now. Colbert telling reporters they've only done one round of interviews. They'll have a second round of interviews post draft. So it may still be like I don't. It's not going to be like the day after the draft they're going to announce a GM. It's going to be a week or two, maybe even longer before they actually announce their GM. So probably you're looking second to third week of May by the time a new GM is announced as Kevin Colbert's replacement. Let me scroll back up here and find some more questions for you guys. Appreciate you hanging out with me on this Monday. Scrolling up the chats. Let's see. Who do I like more, Ritter or Howell? Howell gives me poor man's Dak vibes. I can see a Dak-like effect from one of the quarterbacks since there isn't that clear number one guy in this draft again. Howell's the one guy I've done the deep dive on so far. I need to do Willis next. So I don't want to give all my thoughts because when you see these guys stacked up against each other, it kind of creates more clarity on who you like and how you think that's going to look. My comp for Howell when I first kind of looked at him, a month or 6 weeks ago, was David Garrard, and I've kind of stuck with that comp after doing a deep dive on him. Howell isn't quite as hefty, we'll say, as Garrard was, but they're pretty close. And in terms of mobility and arm, both Carolina guys. I just kind of get that feel. I know he gets compared to Baker a lot, Howell does, and I can see that to an extent. I think Howell's overall a better decision maker than Baker was, and a big difference between them is their personality. Baker was a much was and is a much more fiery, kind of rah-rah leader. I'm not saying there's a good or bad thing, just how he is and how he was at Oklahoma, planting the flag and all that kind of stuff. Howell's a very quiet guy, very calm demeanor, very steady, doesn't get too high, doesn't get too low. There's pros and cons with that. But demeanor-wise, they are vastly different people. So I get the Baker comp in that respect, but from an on-field standpoint, in terms of football type stuff, but in terms of personality, they really seem like different guys. So I don't land on that Baker comp as much as others do. So I kind of have a David Garrard, Jake Locker comp for Howell. That probably sounds more negative than what I'm trying to make it out to be. I'm just saying, like, stylistically, that's who he reminds me of. Not necessarily in terms of NFL careers. Jake Locker, obviously, injuries and whatnot, did not have a successful NFL career. But Howell's tough. Like, Howell's a very tough dude who took a beating behind an offensive line that did not play particularly well. So Pittsburgh might be a good place, might be a good fit for him after all. Let's scroll back on through as my go-to filler word. Why didn't the Steelers pick up Edmonds' option? He would have had trade value this offseason. Even if we didn't want to keep him, I'm not sure how much trade value he would have had. Just too much money, I guess, and did not create impact plays in the pass game, is my belief and guess as to why Edmonds' fifth-year option was not picked up. About 20 minutes left here. What do I think of Fa'alele, Daniel Fa'alele from Minnesota? I know Jacob Harrison from the site is a big fan of him overall for his size, but movement ability at 387. I don't know why he has to be 387 though. His weight really, I thought he'd come in lighter. Usually those big guys come in lighter at the Senior Bowl and events because they want to show scouts they can slim down. We'll see what he comes in at the combine, but like no one's ever been drafted 387, at least not in a long, long time. In terms of what they weighed in, at the combine. So he can still be 367 and still be the biggest dude on the field at 6'8", 6'9", 367. But probably be able to move a bit better. I know Jacob's concern is getting beat to the inside. That happened with him quite a bit. So I don't have any incredibly strong thoughts, but you just wonder is it just a little too big? But I know he's not just a size guy. Like he's not the big guy you stick in goal in gym class. It's just like go play goal and take up space. He can move, and so that is unique. But I'm probably not as high on him as others. But I am interested in the story and the guy because it's obviously a unique situation with his size. Thoughts on Wentz from Jarrett? I pass on Wentz. I'm not certainly not trading capital for him. Contract's too big, too high, low, too volatile. I know there are highs in this game, but again, that's that purgatory thing. And listen, the Colts had him for 1 year. Former OC Frank Reich trades for him, and then after 1 year says, "No, I can't have this guy anymore. He will cost me my job." So if that guy's moving on, and he is, and they are, that's a big red flag to every other team. Stay away from Carson Wentz, and I would stay away from Carson Wentz, Jarrett. Tim Chase, Corbett said quarterback accuracy top priority. Who's best in this draft class? That's a good question. I think most people would probably say Pickett. Again, I need to go through some of these guys to better evaluate that. I think Willis wouldn't be that guy. Maybe Ritter. I think Ritter's shown good accuracy. Strong has shown some accuracy. Howell. I think his downfield accuracy is really impressive. Some of the shorter stuff, RPO games, a bit more inconsistent. So I think most people would probably say Pickett. Josh, did you know the Steelers allowed more rushing yards and yards rushed per rush attempt in 2021 than they ever have in their entire history as a football organization, even go back to 33? I need an article about that seriously, but we did an article about that. I think it might have been mid-season or just after the season, but we did write about that and outline some of that stuff, and that's why we used the term not just 32nd ranked run defense in Pittsburgh, but a historically bad run defense because that's what it was in Pittsburgh. So yeah, this was done December 11th of 2021, and I think this is data since 1946, as far back as PFR's data went, and then we were showing, where they ranked, and that 4.97 was the most of all time. They finished the year at 4.99, excluding the playoff game where they allowed 4.8 yards per carry. So not only were last, but clearly in last place. Prior high was 4.71 in 1954. So last by a wide margin, not where you want to be. Alex Kappa, just like Alex Kozora, a great leader for the team and fixes everything. Well, I think that's probably more true for Kappa than it is me. Yeah, Kappa was a small school guy, Senior Bowl guy that starred well. And we talk about Jensen a lot, but I've seen Kappa's name get thrown around by some Steeler fans, so I'll have a free agent wish list. I guess it's gonna be coming up quick here, just after the combine, a little bit after the combine, probably. 100 people here in the chat. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Um, Time for a couple more questions. Let me just find where I'd left off at. Initially, Troy would lately be an upgrade over Chooks. Probably, certainly as a run blocker. Very different guys, different body types, power, finesse, those kinds of things. So, short answer, yeah, probably would be. Both get beat to the inside a bit in pass pro, though. Both, I think, have similar weaknesses in pass protection. Do I have a draft crush yet? We all know Dave's. I'm guessing yours would be Damone Clark. I wouldn't say Clark. I think he just fits well, like in terms of guys that feel like they're a Steeler. I really like Jalen Petre from Baylor, the slot safety guy, physical. Kind of reminds me of Mike Hilton, but a bit bigger version of Mike Hilton. Good in coverage, good Senior Bowl week. Just a really aggressive downhill guy, and I always like those guys. So I'm not sure if he's like my rubber stamp draft crush, but Jalen Petre, the first name that comes to mind when you ask that question, Mike. Are the Bengals in the Super Bowl if they draft Sewell over Chase? I doubt it. More than ever, I'm for playmakers. Not saying I don't value O line, but hope we had a dynamic wide receiver this offseason. You're probably right about the Jonathan. That they're not in the Super Bowl without Chase, but they're not in the Super Bowl without Burrow. Burrow is the first piece to that, and so by that logic, go quarterback because it went Burrow, then Chase, then Super Bowl, and they made some really good signings in free agency, and Hendrickson, and Mike Hilton, and trading for B.J. Hill, Larry Ogunjobi before he got hurt, and things like that. So it's hard to follow another team's blueprint to a T, but to that point, quarterback comes first. If Willis is off the board when we pick, what do you think of Carson Strong from Nevada? Fan of Steel. Dave's a big fan of him, watched him quite a bit. Lack of mobility is going to be his issue. Pittsburgh's not going to be too keen on that, and the long term health of that knee is going to scare some teams off. And so, don't think he'll be in play for the Steelers. Get busy living. Alex, are you the best thing to happen to Steeler Nation since the terrible towel? No, not at all. I am low on that list of best things to happen since Myron Cope's The Terrible Towel. Many, many, many things. So appreciate that, but definitely not. Kendrick Green going to be center again next season? Yeah, I'm kind of thinking that'll happen. I'm with you, Wally. We'll see what happens, but that's my sense of things. 007 Steelers would benefit from a veteran receiver. Yeah, it just depends who that is. I'd prefer a speed guy. If Juju's gone, you look for a big slot type of guy. What Juju brought you was pretty valuable, pretty unique, run blocking as well. Um, so yeah, I mean, they would benefit from more help at receiver, but it's just Deontay and Claypool and maybe McLeod, and that's about it. Need more than that. With the Flores signing, does that make it more likely we trade our third round pick from next season? Considering if he gets a head coaching job, we get an extra third. No, that's calculations this team's not making. And plus Flores would have to be on staff for at least 2 years and become a head coach. And no, that's not a consideration. Flores is a good coach. Chance to get him, you hire him, and that's the focus. So no. Who are we gonna draft from Tyrone Johnson? I don't know, Tyrone. We'll see what the pro days bring us. Pro days usually have they do have an incredibly strong correlation between where Tom and Colbert go for their pro day circuit and who the team drafts in the first round. Every single first round pick drafted under Mike Tomlin and Kevin Colbert since at least 2010, they've been at their pro day, and maybe even earlier than that. I could never find out for sure if Ziggy Hood, if they were at his Missouri pro day in '09. I don't think they were, but I've never been able to find out for sure. But I've never found any evidence they were there, so I've been operating under the assumption they were not at his pro day in '09. And Hood, while a decent player, not a good team fit, so maybe they should have been at his pro day. Or the fact they were not at his pro day should have been reason to not draft Ziggy Hood. But long time ago, what are you gonna do? Let's see. What else do we have here? Do you think Colbert will be more aggressive than he's ever been, knowing he's got some cap and this is his last off season, i.e., spending a potential trade up in the draft? Yeah, I think he will be. Not so much because it's his last season. I mean, he's not so arrogant and irresponsible that he doesn't project the long term future of this team. That he's gonna like just go hog wild and say, next guy's problem. I don't think that's gonna be the calculation. But when you have more cap space than you've had ever, basically in Colbert's tenure, even as a percentage of the cap, not just raw dollars, because the cap almost always goes up, except for this time a year ago. But they're going to be more aggressive because they have more money to play with. The franchise quarterback's off the book, so I think they'll be more aggressive, but not because it's Colbert's last year, just because they have the ability to be more aggressive. There are less constraints that will allow them to be more aggressive in a very critical offseason for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Let's see, about 8 minutes left here. 112 people in the chat. Appreciate you guys being here. I'll try to get to as many questions as I can. Fairly rapid fire. Just trying to see where I left off at. The last question was about Colbert. How important is it the Steelers find a true backup running back to save some wear and tear on Najee? I like the running back out of West Virginia. I think it's less about wear and tear. There's an element of that, but just like if Harris ever were to go down, you gotta have some sort of actual kind of like true runner that can pick up the slack. Not gonna be the guy like Harris is, but you don't want to feel like you're totally lost because Harris goes down because you rely on him so much. So I think it is good to get another running back, and it's hard to do that through free agency because you got to pay a guy, and who wants to come to Pittsburgh when Harris is playing 80% of the time? So I think a later day three draft pick makes sense there, and that's why I went Letty Brown out of WVU. Will Mason Rudolph be the starter? If you made me answer, I'm going to say no, but certainly could be. And as Colbert said today, if the season began today, he would be the starter because who else would it be? Najee's not a bust, tribe. I don't even know what that means. Who will be the next main quarterback of the Steelers? That's from Grim Phoenix. I don't know if you're asking for 2022 or like long term option, and I don't have great answers to either of those questions. So I guess it doesn't really matter what question you're asking there. We'll see. It'll be fun. We're all along for the ride. We're all in this together, Grim Phoenix. Yeah, Flores Fitzpatrick. Yeah, Fitzpatrick wasn't happy the way Flores used them, but it's not going to be a concern. They know how Fitzpatrick's best used. Flores is not his positional coach. It's all good. Let's see, a couple more questions here. Talking about biggest busts, Gabe Rivera. Yeah, Senor Sack. Got in that drunk driving accident, paralyzed. Didn't draft Marino, and so that was in '84, right? That's a little history there from Chris and I. My thoughts on Joe Schobert from Brock Sasser. I get he was in a tough spot, getting traded right before the year, season began, right as training camp was breaking, had like two practices before camp broke. And that's a tough transition, not only professionally, but personally. You're moving, finding a new house, moving your family, stuff like that. That's difficult. And so in a year or two, you think he would be better. The way that Cassius Marsh was better in camp this summer than he performed as a player when he got poached off the Colts practice squad in 2020. Having that continuity and stability is important, but Sherwood's making almost 9 million this year, and he did not play at a $9 million level, and so I think it's hard to run it back with Schobert and Bush and expect a lot of progress there. I understand why they traded for Schobert after Vince Williams retired, and they felt like they had a chance to get a guy who was more well-rounded than Spillane, and he is, but unless he takes a significant pay cut, I think you have to move on from Schobert and look elsewhere and get some more physical downhill thumpers against the run. Storm. So this means we still won't know how our offense would look because Canada is on a 1 year prove it, and our new GM will have to pick direction we will go. Not entirely sure what you're asking there, but yeah, this offense is a work in progress. It may not provide all the answers in just this year. Um, yeah, I think that's part of that transition. Let's see what else do we have here. What would I offer Joe Hayden, or would you want him back? It's tough. I don't know what money contractually I would offer him, what he would take. You got to love and respect what Hayden's done for this team as a leader, as the veteran savvy, the run defense, some of the big plays he's made, picking off Tom Brady. But dude's getting pretty old. He's 32, 33. He can't run like he used to. Not going to get better. Only going to get worse. That veteran savvy only gets you so far. It's just hard to commit to a guy even for 1 year, certainly for a multi-year deal. So I would look at Witherspoon first before I looked at Joe Hayden. But we'll see. And I don't say that flippantly because listen, I was not a big fan of when they signed Hayden initially when the Browns cut him, and I was wrong about that. Clearly wrong. So I'm trying to be more nuanced in understanding my wrongness. But I mean, the guy is struggling to run athletically against vertical routes, against speedy receivers as an outside corner in the AFC North with Hollywood Brown, Jamar Chase, whoever the Browns bring in, they're going to address receiver heavily. That's coming. And just the AFC and football in general, it just, there's a time where you say thank you and you move on. And I think that time is now for Joe Hayden. What do I think about the revival of the USFL? Will I be a Pittsburgh Maulers fan? I'll probably watch the first week and then forget about the existence of the USFL, especially because they don't play in Pittsburgh. They're all playing in Birmingham this year, and I think the playoffs are in Canton. Yeah, maybe I'll watch. I always say, well, I watch a little bit. I don't watch a lot of TV in general, unless it's a Steelers game or some like ultra marquee sports event, playoffs or something like that, Penn's game. That's really important. So my TV is usually not on, so I just don't. I forget, and I just see a highlight on Twitter and go, I'll take it. But cool that Kirby Wilson is the head coach. That is pretty cool. Let's see. Some Cordell Stewart talk. Yeah, Banner is liked. Yeah, Banner's a great guy. I mean, and so that's it's a business though. But you certainly understand, like Banner's been a really good dude, and the fact that he's still in the league right now after almost falling out of the league when his weight was over 400 pounds, is a testament to what he's been able to do, the money he's been able to make. Like that's all well and good, but the guy he just hasn't played. Yeah, I don't even know a whole lot about him as an NFL offensive tackle because I have not gotten to see very much of that, and it's just hard to justify. So it goes back to Hayden, where like they're really good people, they're really good guys, and Banner's just had some crappy luck, tearing his ACL the first game of the year after winning the job, beating out Chooks at right tackle. Um, but it's a business. Did Pittsburgh show interest in Jordan Love? They were not at the Utah State Pro Day. I'm like 99% sure of that. So from that standpoint, no obvious interest. First position filled in free agency, first in the draft. I really don't know. Offensive line, broadly, maybe quarterback in the draft, obviously, but we'll have to wait and see. Shouldn't the Steelers trade? I assume that's Deontay Johnson, Alex Highsmith before they price themselves off the team. No, those are building blocks of the future. You can re-sign those guys. You will have money to re-sign those guys. So no, I would not do that blue cheer. Connor Hayward or that type that could wear multiple hats, a tight end running back, aka H back would be perfect. Yeah, you'll see that name in mock drafts a lot, I'm sure. Josh, I don't think you're the only one that thinks Henry Mondeau is bad. I don't think many people think Mondeau is very good. I like his effort. I like his athleticism. I like that he kind of looks like a chubby Post Malone, but as a defensive lineman in football, not quite as much. Is Watson in any way viable to trade for? Not until the legal issues get cleared up. No one's touching him. Even the Dolphins, who clearly wanted Deshaun Watson, weren't trading for him until the legal issues got resolved. They did not get resolved, so he did not get dealt. Beavers with two question marks from Andrew. Assume that means Darian Beavers. I liked him. Big size, 250, big lower half, explosive. Can he cover? Can he run backwards? And flip his hips? Maybe some questions there, but had a decent Senior Bowl showing. Trade Bush for a third rounder. Bush is not going to get a third rounder. He's not going to get much for you right now, so that's not going to happen, Chris. Why was the run D so horrible? We're out of time to really answer all those things. Youth up front, a lot of mistakes, a lot of bad assignments. Guys not being in the right spots, learning on the fly. Backup guys being starters, depth guys being backup guys, guys you never heard of getting rotational snaps. It was a domino effect up front, and the inside linebackers did not play well as well. XFL or USFL. XFL, the rule changes are kind of cool. We'll see how their collab with the NFL is, but I probably really won't watch a lot of either. Couple more questions and I'll finish things out because it is after 8 o'clock. Didn't Edmonds and Minka have the most combined tackles as a safety tandem in the NFL? I don't know that for sure, but that sounds right, Todd. Because Minka had 124, 114, something like that. Too many. And Edmonds was, I don't know, 90 something. So probably. I don't know what tandem had would have more. Maybe Buffalo with Poyer and Hyde, but probably not. The fact those guys played that much as well gives them a chance to get a lot of tackles. And yeah, Minka had significantly more tackles of 10 plus yards than any other player in the NFL. I think he had 71 tackles this year, 10 plus yards. Next closest was like 56, and that's the NFL, not Pittsburgh. Next closest was 56, I think. And so a wide margin between first and second place. Jameson Williams, maybe ACL, obviously. What's he going to give you year one? I'd probably go somewhere else than Williams. His receiver class is strong, so I would probably not take him at 20. Isaiah Johnson at corner, one of those convert guys. Interesting guy out of Houston, long, lean player. We'll see if he even makes it to camp. If he does, we'll talk about him then. But not really thinking he's part of the plans, right? Only got signed initially because I think Lyndon Stevens got put on COVID, and they signed Johnson, and they brought him back the way they brought back other guys that bounced on off the roster. Nate Gilliam and Rex Sunahara and guys like that. So we'll see. We'll see if he's in camp and go from there. All right, looks like we're out of questions. I think I answered almost every question, as many as I could and as many as I saw. So appreciate you guys being here. Again, Dave should be back for our next live stream 2 weeks from now, although that is around combine time, I believe. So we'll have to see exactly how that fits in the schedule. Obviously, combine stuff generally happens during the day, so we should be okay. But just throwing that out there right now. So appreciate you guys being here. Thank you to all the super chats. You guys were far too generous, and appreciate you watching. Again, have a video up right now about Steelers coaching hires. Do a video on my first mock draft in the next day or two, and we'll have other video content in the near future on the channel. So thank you guys for hanging out with us, and we'll talk to you soon.